Baking is not a piece of cake when the weather is in the recipe book. I spent the day with Michelle, chef and baking instructor here at Well Done Cooking Class, and I'm here to get the know on the dough.
So baking is a science, so you really have to measure, your ratios really matter. Whereas when you're doing savory cooking, I can just throw some stuff in there and be like, bam, and it tastes good. If I throw some extra baking powder in it, it could have an adverse effect on anything we do, right? Not only is it just the atmosphere, your ambient temperature, how it feels outside, but it's also your cooking vessel, your elevation. Are you cooking at a really high elevation where you need to adjust the temperature?
I grew up in South Louisiana.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a little bit of my background here. So I grew up, we made gumbo. I saw some andouille sausage back there. So y'all are going to be cooking that up sometime soon, apparently.
When it comes to these, I kept coming across a similar issue.
Every time we would make our pralines, which again is like a pecan candy that I'm sure you're very familiar with.
So
delicious. Delicious.
Yeah.
But whenever it would rain or whenever it'd be really humid outside, the candy wouldn't set right. And I thought it was an old wives' tale. Oh, the weather is what made the candy come out bad.
Well, that weather is true.
Turns out these sweet treats don't like the heat.
The more humid the air is, the more moisture and water droplets it can kind of hold on to. So it really is really tough to work with candies and things that have a high butter content, because as they start to sweat and as they start to melt down, that's when you have a lot of breakage. So when you're making a delicate sauce or you're making pralines or something, that particular composition can break and it starts kind of melting on you, if you will.
Some are more temperamental than others.
Croissants are very, you know how much butter is up in croissants. They're delicious, but once you make them once, you're like, am I about that life? Because literally it's a pound of butter. It's probably about this big butter chunk that goes in, and that butter has to be extremely cold. So the reason why it needs to be that cold is because as you start to do laminations, which means you're kind of turning the dough into the butter, rolling it, doing another fold, that kind of a thing, that creates those beautiful, delicious, flaky layers in a crust or a puff pastry or a croissant. Now, if your butter is too warm, it doesn't have the stability to create steam, which creates those little pockets of air in your dough. So not only is the butter all sad and flat, your croissant's gonna be sad and flat too. It's gonna be a yummy piece of buttery bread, but it won't be croissant because it has to be super cold.
At the end of the day, the taste will all be the same. It's the texture and visual aesthetic that will lose brownie points because of the weather.